convenes meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Do we have any public participation here? I think not. Okay. And no one online there. Very good. Okay, so we'll get right into it. We have a lot of things on the agenda tonight. The first one is Youth and Family Services. Does Town Hall 2 have a report, Brad?
Yes, we do.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
The fries are done, excuse me. Town Hall 2 Subcommittee discussed the budget on Monday for Youth and Family Services. There is an increase to salaries from steps, and I was looking over the notes for last year, and there was some movement in personnel and part-time to half-time, part-time to full-time, full-time to part, all around. That has stabilized, so that's stable for this year going into next year. The one comment, the one thing I could add to what's printed in the budget is that one of the full-time positions, which is not included in the operating budget at the moment, I believe, is being paid by the ARPA funds for now. So moving on, contracted services is up 11,300 in large part because of the movement from, they've provided there's an interface referral service that's used by both the town and the schools. The cost for that is $18,000. The school picks up half of that, the town picks up the other half. In past years, that's been paid for through, you said a gift account or grants or such. It really should be part of the operating budget. So as of this year, that's been moved in. Let's see, MELT is up a bit because of an increase in fees. The overall budget request is for $529,917. That's an increase of $18,827 or 3.68%. The subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
I have 529,912.
Right. $5 could put you over the edge.
I know, hold on.
He goes over the edge easily, though.
We can take up a collection. I just want to make sure we get the right number.
Hold on.
So that's what's published online, Brad.
This is budget 549, by the way.
Yep.
Yes.
That's what we have in the.
That is a 12, and I do know what the transcription error was, so let me restate that as 529,912.
Very good.
Excuse me.
All right. And we have Christine Shrewhan with us. Would you like to add anything to that, please?
Not at this point. I'll answer questions if people have questions.
Okay, great. Do we have any questions or comments for Youth and Family Services? Steve.
Could you talk a little bit about the caseload this year and how things are going, and if you're seeing changes from past years?
If we're seeing what from past years, I'm sorry?
Changes.
Since the pandemic, there's been an increase in the number of clients that we've been serving. That piece has been consistent this past year as well, which was part of the reason for moving one of the part-time into a full-time position and adding another part-time position. ARPA funds has funded those two pieces, but that certainly has helped us not be at a wait list in November. We're typically in a wait list around somewhere between March and May, which is what will happen again this year.
Thank you.
Yep. But in terms of numbers, we've served roughly 354 residents of the community over the course of the year.
Thank you. A couple
couple of things. One, the schools have started talking about quite a few non-English speaking students that they've gotten. Are you seeing referrals from that? Or is
Yes, we
that
are.
something that you-
And we're seeing a lot of referrals.
Services?
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, can you offer services now, or is that something you're looking at?
The school is offering online services that are in native language. We are in the process of hiring, I have somebody who's going to be retiring that, and we're going to be hiring somebody who is a we're looking for a Spanish-speaking clinician. We're hoping to be able to fill that position, which will help service a significant number of folks that are needed. For the most part, what my staff are doing right now are the basic needs piece of things. So we do the social service stuff. Folks that are having difficulty paying rent, utilities, come through our office, and we do a screening to sort of look at big picture and try to connect them with resources. Google Translate has helped with that piece a bit. So, and there are some translating services that we've used as well.
And the grant, the $350,000, that's $175,000 a year, I assume, for 2 years. And how is that being applied? What is that?
How is that?
How is it being used? It says it's for homelessness
Well,
prevention.
right now, we're in the process of trying to fill the position for the youth navigator position, which would be the person sort of connecting to kids that need assistance with that. So we're having a hard time filling that position. If you know of anybody who's interested in working with youth homelessness in particular, there is the position is still open on the town's, HR.
Is that a big problem that we have?
Yes, we're not the only ones that are having difficulty filling
No,
that.
I mean more the youth homelessness in
Yes.
Burlington. Yeah.
Yes, when we were applying for the grant, we reached out to Christina Ciccolini at the school, who is the youth homelessness liaison at the school, to find out, roughly what their experience is in terms of youth that are either homeless or on the verge of homeless, and on almost 2 handfuls, she could name kids that were struggling with that. So when we applied for the grant, we figured, being able to place 6 to 8 youth during the course of the 2 years of the grant was what we were searching, what we were aiming for.
And then finally, what's the longer-term plan? when the grant
Well,
goes
what
in?
you hope for is if, again, sort of looking at big picture, some of these kids may need help finishing up an associate's degree or something like that, so it's connecting them with that, covering the cost of their living expenses during that period of time. At the end of that, they may still need some support, but that's connecting them with state and federal resources at that particular point in time.
I guess I mean more, when the 2 years is up, will that just roll into the operating budget? Is that 100?
No, if, at the end of 2 years, if we were successful in placing youth, and as long as the federal government continues that program, we would continue to receive funding for it. So it wouldn't be something that gets, rolled into.
Thank you.
It's a pretty significant amount of money.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I had a question on the salary page. There's a part-time worker with just longevity but no salary. Is that because they transitioned somewhere, or it seems a little unusual? This,
That's just the phone number for some other instead of longevity.
Say that again?
I think you put that as like a phone number, it's not longevity.
Oh, that's not longevity, that's, right. So for our group program in the summertime, there's summer help that we have. It sort of falls under, that's the funding for the group program in the summer.
okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chris?
How are you finding that families are able to access town services, especially if they're non-English speakers? And are there any gaps that you could give us suggestions on just as a whole?
Probably the biggest gap is the language piece of things. So looking at both on the town, school's done some pieces around sort of addressing some of the language pieces. I think on the town side, being able to do that, having the translation services available. Because we work with youth and their families, we're able to utilize the same service that the schools does. But on the town side, I think when it comes to whatever the needs are for folks that this is not their first language is difficult. Transportation is another issue. I'm working with Marge with the pilot program that we have that we're offering, and we're doing the registering of people that are, who English is not their first language. So we're sort of the hub, I guess, if you would, for helping. And of course, in conjunction with the other nonprofit organizations, you know, People Helping People, Pantry, Helpies. We meet together as a group, which is also helpful to meet the need in different ways.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. All right, this is for Youth and Family Services. Everyone's here, so we can do a show of hands. It's for $529,912. All right, those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstained? All right, that's 1300. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, next is the Historical Commission, which is account 691. Do we have a subcommittee report, Brad?
Yes. So for this year's Historical Commission budget, there's a small decrease in contracted services. There is an increase in materials and supplies. This is the bulk of that increase is for preparations for the upcoming 225th town anniversary celebration. We'll all have the technical term for that down by the time it rolls around. Budget request is for $10,000, which is an increase of $380 or 3.95%. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
All right, and we have Joyce Fay and...
Yes.
I'm sorry, who's with you, please?
Wayne Higdon.
Very good. Would you like to add to that?
Um,
A resident of Burlington, too.
yeah. I'm chairperson of the Historical Commission. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Very good. We're all happy with it.
Thank you.
All right. Let me just get my sheet back here. So this is for Historical Commission, $10,000. Those in favor, raise your hand, please. Opposed? Abstained? Very good. That's 1300. Thank you very much.
You want to say something?
I'm not going to hold this up.
We're on a roll.
So far, so good.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, though, I think if we could just, while Joyce is here, just to let anybody who's watching know they're going to start to look for some help as they start to discuss Burlington's 225th birthday, which is coming up February 28th, because I can cheat and look right behind your head, sir, 2024, right? So if everybody wants to just look for when Joyce and her committee are looking for help, I'm sure they'll appreciate any help they can get as they celebrate Burlington's 225th year.
We're in the process of sending out an all-call for anybody who wants to join any of the committees.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Board of Appeals, which is budget 176.
So,
Subcommittee report, Brad.
we do. So for yet another year, the subcommittee is cavalierly not met to discuss this budget. It is, it's the one recording clerk salary that, since Board of Appeals is a separate entity, it's the one that was not able to be rolled up into the general line item for such services. But the budget for recording services for them is level funded at $13,731. There is no vote.
All right. Is Michael Murray here by any chance? Or anyone from administration like to talk about that? Or not?
Mike Murray is not on the ZBA anymore, so
You picked a wrong one, so.
But he's still not here.
And he's still not here.
So that makes sense. Is there a new department head that,
This committee operates independently, so there's no real department head assigned.
Oh, I'm sorry,
They're
yeah.
appointed by the select board, and they have recording clerk and pretty significant. It's not just meeting minutes, there's a lot of mailers and notices to abutters and advertisements and things of that nature. So it's a little bit more prep work than a traditional recording clerk, so.
John, there is a new contact, and I can forward that to you in case I get hit by a bus. But I did reach out to them and explained that there was probably no need for them to attend this evening.
fair enough. Ed?
Did they make a request? It looks like they spent considerably more than this budget last year, and they're reverting to the budget from the year before.
We just level funded it.
It is what it is.
Well, it'll be something we'll have to resolve by the end of the year, so.
Any other questions?
Approve?
Second.
Thank you.
No,
All right, so this is for
So,
Board of Appeals, 13,731.
20 grand.
Raise your hand in favor. Opposed? Abstain. And that passes 13-0-0. All right, next is Town Clerk, which is budget 161. And just a heads up, I'm going to move up the town meeting and reports so Amy doesn't have to stay here all night and listen to DPW.
I don't take care of that one.
Oh, your name was on it, so,
Uh-oh.
okay.
Uh-oh.
Any rate, Brad, do you have a site plan report?
Certainly. So for the town clerk's budget, salaries are increased by contract and by a request for the transitional advisor compensation. There's an increase in contracted services for training on the permitting system and an increase in the microfilm reader printer maintenance. Just in case Roger asked, there was some discussion as to the delta on that page. This year's information is correct. We went back, what they've got marked for last year's information is not, but we went back to last year's budget. All of the deltas on the cover sheet are correct, and at some point we can have a discussion of, pardon me for the aside, Mr. Chairman. I have one issue that came up with this budget, and I have seen it in other budgets in the past, is when we're comparing this year's budget to last, if there was a line item from last year that is not being funded for this year, oftentimes it is dropped from the documentation, and then when you're adding up what the plus or minus is, there can be gaps. So perhaps we can discuss ways to double check that kind of stuff. Not that I'm pointing the finger at Whitney, I'm just asking for help with next year. So,
Person with the
Guess I can't
answers.
add anything in.
returning to the budget, the specifics of the budget, melt fees are up a bit because of an increase in fees on one of the meetings. Also note that the town clerk's budget, as long-term members of the committee are aware, this budget varies quite a bit from year to year as a function of the number of elections. There are only 2 elections for FY '24. This leads to a decrease in election costs from last year of 16.55%. The budget request, now I'm nervous if I have this transcribed correctly, I believe it's $515,496.
Wow.
You're off a dollar, you're getting better.
No, I have to look at the right page or else it really doesn't match.
$95, which the increase is obviously wrong, but it's an increase of 2.2%. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Great. All right, and we have Amy Warfield, our town clerk, with us. Would you like to add anything to that?
Nope, I think that Brad kind of laid it out pretty much.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just noticed in the cover sheet, there was an increase in elected and appointed due to transitional advisor compensation. Is someone leaving? Is that the transitional advisor?
No. Well, as clerks, we plan ahead. My term is up in 2026. So that transition manager position is an 18-month position, so I'm planning ahead.
Meaning, in case you don't get,
In case I decide to retire.
okay.
Chris?
Congratulations on another successful town election.
Thank you, Chris.
15.34%, you know, it's about par, but still, you know, not where I think anyone would want. Any thoughts on how we could potentially advertise better or, you know, try and really get those numbers up 20, 25%?
Well, it's one of the fine lines that the clerk's office has. I'm the chief election officer. I'm responsible for running an election. I'm not supposed to be involved in participating in advancing candidates' positions. The only thing by law I'm allowed to do is that when we do have a question on a ballot that is town-related, then we have to put out a piece. So a piece of it is I'm responsible for kind of recruiting people, getting people to run, but it's part of the candidate's job to make sure they get people out to vote for them. 15% is pretty consistent across the Commonwealth and across the country for local races. The only time in Burlington's history that we have had anything better than 20% was back in the days when we were fighting with Proposition 2.5 overrides. Then we did hit 60, 70%. And that's pretty typical for across the Commonwealth. It's really, really hard to get people to understand that voting for town meeting people, voting for selectmen, voting for any of the elected offices are really the people that are spending the taxpayers' money. It's just, you know, I always get hit with people say, I'll ask them, well, why don't you vote? Oh, I vote in the important elections. And I'm like, oh, really? Which ones are those? And so, yeah, it's a dilemma. So, I mean, in towns that have stronger League of Women Voters, or Burlington's now got, there's a group that's working on the Burlington Coalition, so they're working on trying to get more word out. They actually were successful in getting 2 or 3 write-in candidates to do write-in campaigns. So, you know, it's a two-edged sword. I can't, the town itself cannot come out and put out, we can't even put out into whatever media you want to put it into nowadays. It used to be newspapers. We can't put out like a profile on a candidate, because if somewhere in that profile somebody takes it that, you know, if somebody puts in their profile, this person is the best candidate for the job, and we as a town put that out, then it would be perceived that we are supporting that candidate, and we can't do that. So that's the dilemma we have. Nationally, of course, when people run, they run, and they do advertising, and they send out cards, and they call people, and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, on the local level, people aren't always that engaged. So it's a really good question. It's something at clerks' conferences we talk about a lot in terms of how do we get more people to come. Running an election, you know, by state law, we have to have a certain number of election workers there. We have to have a certain number of police there. Fortunately, we have a very good relationship with the schools, so the schools it doesn't cost us to use the school. I have to pay custodians. But, you know, all of those things are kind of almost fixed costs, no matter which election you have, whether you have 2,800 people show up or whether you have 18,000 show up. So, yep, I'm always open for ideas. But yeah, it's a problem.
Doug?
Tony, just had a 36% turnout, and they were voting for their 5th overrider exclusion in 5 years.
Yeah.
And their 17th since 2000, so clearly we need to spend a lot more money and
I was gonna say,
make people
Paul?
angry.
Dollar Rile.
little debt exclusion, 2.5 override, fun.
You get some overrides and exclusions.
Well, that's one way to get them out, huh? I don't think that's exactly the
Then they know when the election is.
motivator. Yeah.
Town yacht. They're getting a new rank. Finally.
We have reverse 911. Would it be valid to call people, everybody, and tell them to come out?
I have
and
used
vote?
that.
Okay.
Past, like, from the 2020 election, because we had to change the date with COVID. I used it then, I used it in 2021, I used it in last year. The results are pretty much the same.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but anyways,
Yeah, it's worth it. It's a very simple way to communicate out to a lot of people, yeah.
just to get people to come out, but anyway.
The one thing that is making a difference is that the vote by mail, people really like that. I haven't gotten to, I've been putting everything else together, I haven't gotten a chance to analyze, but just rough numbers, we had about 55 voters for this election, and we had gotten returned almost 1,500 vote by mail ballots. So vote by mail is picking up momentum.
So it's convenient, but it doesn't add to the number of votes.
I'm sorry?
It's convenient, but it hasn't really added to the,
No, it's not going to. And early
it's not
voting,
motivating people.
right,
to,
early voting and vote by mail across the country, again, I've got a lot of statistics on it, has not increased voter turnout.
Ed?
Is the postage free on those mail-in ballots?
Coming back to the town, yes, we pay for the postage going out.
If I remember correctly, there was a $500 line item for stamps. Is that all
That
postage?
is also that is part of that, but it's also all the other mailers that we have to do. We have to,
Well, that's 770 stamps, and you just,
well, we have to mail out, there's two things we primarily use postage on. We have to mail out whenever we identify somebody as having left town, but as a voter, they did not let us know. We have to mail out a confirmation card for them. I figured out a while ago to use a two-sided postcard, so I usually spend about $900 in postage to get those. The other thing that we have to mail out a lot of is the voter acknowledgements. Now, a lot of that comes through central supply, so it's run off the postal meter. And that's what most of the ballots go out through the postal meter, our postal meter. But this is stuff that the office directly sends out.
so my question though specifically was, where are the stamps? I see stamps for $500. That was a whole lot more.
The metering's at central admin,
The
I think.
postage
It goes in
for the
central mail.
ballots is coming out of the central supply number,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, this is for the town clerk budget, $515,495. Your hand is yes? No? Abstain? All right, that's 1300.
Thank you,
And
Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Amy.
we'll try.
Ed,
One more.
yeah, we have more. Yeah, I just want to throw in there, I have never heard anyone complain about any election problems, so
Well,
you're doing a fabulous job on
you
that.
must be, thank you. I'll take that.
The weather wasn't too good.
Must not be listening.
Other than the ones you lose, of course. A lot, yeah.
Well, and you can always come and camp out on the day of the election, and then you can hear all the complaints, if you desire.
Okay, our next budget is Board of Registrars, which is account 162. Do we have a report, Brad?
Yes, this budget is level funded for $13,150.
Got it.
All right, right on. There's been some play in this budget over recent years, but this year they were fine with it as it is. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Thank to add anything to that?
No, this is the easy one.
Okay. Any questions? Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, there's a book that traditionally has come out that has by street, precinct name. I heard that's going to be discontinued,
What?
that book is going to be discontinued?
As far as the legislation is right now, we still have to print it.
Okay.
That
And
was
it's-
not in any part of any of the election stuff. That is still hanging out in another piece of legislation. But, yeah, as far as we know, we have to still print it in June.
And you cover the cost of the publishing of that?
That comes out of the, part of the Board of
3,000.
Registrar stuff.
Okay, thank you.
We have cut back dramatically on the number that I print.
Mhm.
We used to regularly print 25 to 30.
The fact that it exists is what's important.
Yeah.
You can always make another one.
And nowadays, most of the public requests for it, they don't want a hard copy. They want it electronically. So, that's where I used to send out probably, there were about 10 organizations outside of town that wanted to have a copy of it. Those people now gladly take an electronic copy.
Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, this is for Board of Registrars budget of $13,150. Raise your hand if yes. Opposed? Abstained? Passes 13-0-0.
Thank you, Amy.
And just in case Amy is involved, let's do the town meeting and reports, which is account 113. Does Town Hall 1 have a report, David?
Yeah. So this is a joint department heads with Amy and Paul. So we met with Wendy, we met with Whitney, and, but the two, this is a level-funded budget at $15,908. There are two parts to this. The part-time salaries basically is the cost of running the town meetings. The check-ins, the kids with the mics and all that. Contracted services is the printing, printing details. So printing packages, printing the annual report, all of that gets lumped into contracted services. So subcommittee voted 2-0.
You guys like to add anything to that, or all good?
No, thank you.
All right, any questions, Roger?
I should probably not ask, but I'll ask the question the right way. If at some point we needed to have more technology support for town meeting, in what form would that show up in the budget or warrant articles?
In what form?
Yes, and timing, and timing,
The timing?
yeah.
I'm guessing if it were for September, we would probably have to look into a reserve fund transfer from the committee, or depending upon the status of free cash, we could make an adjustment at the same meeting that we were engaging in additional services. They have not been requested as of yet. So.
Okay, I guess that's far enough. I mean, there's a long rabbit hole there, but I'll skip it.
Is this in regards to potential bylaw changes that you're asking, or?
No, not specifically,
Okay.
nothing in particular, no.
I feel like there's an underground message going on.
Yeah.
I'm missing it, I'm missing
Like,
it.
what are we missing?
Robots for town meeting members, that's what it is.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Didn't sound sure.
Before this goes off the rails.
This is,
We'll have ChatGPT running the next town meeting.
town meeting reports budget of $15,908. Raise your hand if in favor. Opposed? Abstain? That's 13-0-0. Now we're really done with you.
Well, thank you all very much. Every year, it's very pleasant to come in and be given money. Thank you.
You did have to ask for it, though.
Well, it's like votes, you just have to ask for it.
Okay, next, we're moving on to DPW, which are the 400 series. We have a subcommittee report, Roger.
Nah, I don't think we'll do that.
Didn't seem
I've been
to
looking
work.
forward to this night since rec night, when those budgets were posted up accidentally.
Let us have it.
All
Let's
right.
go.
So Sonia and I met with Brian White and Rachel and Paul and John about the DPW budgets. So the operating budget is, actually, it's under guideline, since we're just talking about the operating budget. There are a lot of changes, there are bits and pieces move around. Obviously, DPW takes care of roads and water and buildings, and there are 6 divisions, cemeteries, so they have a lot of and varied responsibilities. I think the biggest one in changes in the budget this year are in the water and sewer division, with the MWRA pipe coming online next fiscal year. The Pine Brook Water Treatment Plant will be taken offline for all intents and purposes, and so there's quite a few savings in the budget with respect to chemicals, electricity, well cleaning. I don't know what the total is, but it does offset a bunch of other things. But there is one significant increase, and maybe all of those offset. We're gonna buy a lot of water this year. And so there is, in the operations budget, there is a big chunk of money for water from the MWRA. There's a warrant article later that covers more in detail about transfer from the Water Enterprise Fund, but that's not part of the operating budget. Part of the cost of water is in the operating budget. See what else is salient. I'll leave something for Brian and Rachel to talk to. One of the problems that they've had, there's the part-time staffing, another area where they find it hard to hire people to do part-time work with the wages that we're offering and the people who want to work or don't want to work. So that's been a little bit of a problem. So anyway, I guess the overall, the budget is, the operation budget is $10,708,201, an increase of 3.53%. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to approve.
Thank you.
Is there anything I should add, Sonia?
The description.
Okay. We have Brian White, Director of DPW with us, and Rachel Leonardo, Business Manager. Would you guys like to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to go off what Roger said, our general high-level overview of increases, it's, as Roger mentioned, we're purchasing more water. In a few months, we're gonna be taking in 3.5 million gallons per day from the MWRA of water, which we're very excited to have that being completed pretty soon. Another big increase that we were unable to predict for this year was the gas and diesel prices. They kind of just skyrocketed because of what's going on overseas. And then general inflation, what we do in the DPW with all 6 divisions is, we're using heavy equipment, we have large contracts, and we got hit really hard from the pandemic with everything that we're purchasing and utilizing. So our inflation is a bit crazy, and we were heavily impacted by it. So that's kind of our giant umbrella of inflation.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's probably right in front of my face here, and I just don't see it, but I think for everyone's benefit, can you just break down the water purchasing? So we're going up to in December, we'll go up to the 3 billion gallons, I think, right, from MWRA per day?
Yeah, as of, once our Phase 2A project completes, which is looking like the end of June, that should give us the full capacity.
Okay,
The
so,
3.5.
but we're also, the water rates are being adjusted as well, correct?
Yes, that's part of I think it was a 10-year plan that John had put in place.
Yeah, I might be misunderstanding this. So is the water rate adjustment primarily for the infrastructure, or is it also for the actual cost of the water?
It's for the cost of the water as well. So basically, the delta between the old water rates and the new water rates goes into a stabilization fund.
Right.
And we use that in our operating budget to offset the purchase of the water.
So the increases that are here, are they assuming those offsets already?
Yeah, the offset is included. Last year, we did an offset of $836,000. This year it's 1.084.
So what line item would be primarily impacted by this increased cost for the water?
That's
Frank,
contracted
look
services.
at account 451,
451?
which is water, the water one. And if you look on the third page, it shows the water assessment and then the offsetting transfer there.
Okay. So that rate was set by the selectmen, it's probably to Paul, the incremental rate for the water? And but it doesn't completely cover it?
Correct.
So,
Ray, I think it is still increasing, right? They plotted out a plan.
right, but this is just this year's budget.
Smoothly move the rates from the old rate to a rate which I imagine will mostly cover MWRA cost of water. And we're somewhere in the middle. I don't know how many more. Where are we in terms of years before the rates stop rising or only rise as fast as the MWRA causes them to rise?
I think we're in the 4th year of the increase of rates in the stabilization fund, but maybe Paul wants to say something.
That sounds about right. And I guess one of the pressures on the water is because of the PFAS issue, we've been required to take more MWRA water sooner than we had anticipated to sort of offset that problem. So I know that that's part of the increase. We're using more MWRA water the past year or two than we had projected and planned for because of the PFAS issue.
So we weren't able to reflect that unanticipated increase with the rate structure, so we're absorbing that in the operating budget?
Yes, based upon the way that Mr. Sanchez had plotted it out, it was a 10-year plan.
Right.
For rate increases, approximate $10 annual increase on the average user's bill each year over 10 years. And again, we've started using the MWRA water at a much faster clip than we had anticipated due to the PFAS contamination.
And if I understand correctly, the intent was never to break even on the water. We've always subsidized water, and that would continue even with the MWRA connection, right?
We're still subsidizing water substantially.
So related to this, Mr. Chairman, so the budget we're going to vote on now is the summary budget,
So there's 3 components to the budget.
right?
There's the 4. There's the roughly $10 million or $11 million DPW budget, operating budget.
Right.
And then there are 3 accommodated accounts that add up
Correct.
to about $3.5 million.
Okay, and the operating budget is what has the water
That's in the operating budget.
in the operating budget. So roughly, do you know how much of that 10.7 million is the cost of water that the town is absorbing?
So we're purchasing it's 1.75 million that we're buying in MWRA water for fiscal '24, and we're offsetting that by 1.084 million.
Then there's presumably additional costs for water we're producing that we're subsidizing also.
So out of the whole $10.7 million operating budget, there's probably 1.5 million or so of subsidized water?
Well, the entire cost of the mill pond operation is in there as well.
Right, but you have to run the plant to make water.
So the
Well,
water budget.
But it's just, the only way you pay for running the plant is through the fees for the water, really. So we subsidize the water rates, and that reflects how much we're absorbing in the operating budget for subsidized
The
water.
costs from the plant are more related to utilities, chemicals, and things of that nature, as opposed to the MWRA water is a purchase of.
They just bill you.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we could bill ourselves too if we wanted to figure it out, but I mean, it's all part of the cost of production of water.
As I think we mentioned before, at one point in time, the last time we did the analysis, I believe that the water was about 50% subsidized by the tax bill.
And you think we'll,
Overall.
you think we'll still run around that level?
We're gonna take a look at it and redo the analysis for both water and sewer.
Is that, okay, so I know, I don't want to belabor this here because we're trying to get through this year's budget, but at some point, whether we agree or not agree to, how much we want to subsidize, we really should know through the analysis of the fully burdened cost, once we're, up to the full MWRA complement, the mill pond is fully operational again, and then just agree on two things. One would be the level of subsidy that makes sense, and the other thing we could relook at is the rate structure based on volume. One of the concerns that I think we all have is that people that are on the lower end of the spectrum, where they just don't want to absorb more and more costs to live here, don't want a gigantic water bill. But on the other hand, the rate structure can skew it to the higher end users and even break out residential versus commercial. And I just wonder if we should fully assess that and just decide where we want it to be. And I don't know that we actually know that today. You might, I'm not being critical. I think it'd be pretty hard to figure out without doing quite a bit of work, but it'd be good to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, Frank, one of the things we saw a few weeks ago is the MWRA is still emphasizing water conservation, and a tiered rate structure might help remind people that the more they use, the more it costs them.
Right, on a non-linear basis.
As you say, it needs a full,
Right.
10-year lifespan evaluation.
Right, and it does seem that, if I'm going on too long, just tell me.
No, I think this is a very relevant question.
So related to this, of course, I assume that the whole drought control thing means that we will be faced with probably water bans even on MWRA.
That's correct.
And that's another pretty unpopular thing for the people that really feel like they're willing to pay for the water, but they can't get it because they want to use it for whatever. And a lot of those are good things. They're beautification. So what's the story on water bans? What does it take to not have to do that so drastically?
So we're kind of implementing a water conservation plan between MWRA, Water Resources Commission, DEP. We have to do what's best for the environment, and they recommend water conservation. Unless you're putting in a new lawn, you really only have to water every other day at most. A couple days a week is probably fine. We know that sod, you have to water every day for at least 2 weeks for it to take hold of it. So we still have to go by state regulations with the redundancy of the water coming in from the MWRA. We don't anticipate ever having to do that full drought water ban that we had to do last year.
That's the heart of it, right? I mean, that really hurts.
Yeah, so I think something we spoke with John Sanchez about last year was that the harshest water restrictions we ever will go to is 1 to 2 days a week.
Okay, that would be great.
So for the past few years, we've had water bans because we were in fear that we would run out of water.
Oh, yeah,
The ongoing basis, if the state calls a drought and they want restrictions on the water, we'll have to restrict the water, but it won't be a case that we are going to lose the entire water system and perhaps run out of water on a busy summer day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may. So with the completion of 2A, we'll get 3.5 million, we can get up to 3.5 million gallons from MWRA. Mill Pond, over time, has occasionally run short of water because the Shawshene River runs short of water. So if there was a really severe drought, the Mill Pond capacity might be offline or might be restricted independently. And I don't think that in the middle of the summer, the town of Water can easily use more than the 3.5 million gallons we can get from the MWRA. So in that eventuality, we probably would have to, with the state's probably insistence, have a more serious water restrictions. So it's not clear sailing from here out.
No, I don't think we'll ever be, water until you're tired of paying for it. That doesn't make sense.
There is a plan for 2B, which is another 3.5 for 3 million gallons of water. But that requires another capital investment because that pipe is not in the ground.
Correct, and that was part of the original plan. That's the additional link from Adams Street to the Middlesex Turnpike and Mall Road intersection. And by upgrading that pipe, we'll be able to take 6.5 million gallons per day from the MWRA. And that's, again, that was all included in the original MWRA project, and we hope to bring that forward probably at next May's town meeting. The final link there to finish off that project.
But since it's capital, it also competes with other capital projects.
Oh, of course, but at least they're one-time investments, and they're really, really important infrastructure. I mean, you know, there are certain things you really need. Conservation can do a lot, but, and I believe in it, I just want to get to the sense of how we can encourage conservation, but make the resource available in a, you know, a reasonable way for the people that really would appreciate having it, use it intelligently.
Do people have questions?
Yes, yeah, but before I forget, if you could just put on your list to work with folks to figure out what the actual cost of MWRA water is, and what's the actual cost of Mill Pond water.
That'll be a triple integral.
And then it's a short step from there, figuring out how much we're subsidizing it.
I think MWRA, they send us a bill, we pay it, right? But yes, I agree.
That one might be easier to figure out.
Probably is.
That could be the warm-up question.
Only double integrals.
Actually, related to that, you could look at the true cost of buying MWRA water versus even making our own on a full-up Mill Pond plant. We think we save money for the water we can make,
And that's exactly what
but you
it's gonna
could, you could metricize that, so that'd be great. Maybe you want some help with that, Roger, I don't know, it's a big project.
I bet you Rachel has,
I already have it, yeah.
Great. Don't let them off the hook, test them.
Make it seem hard.
Just-
Work for it.
Just double check her work, that's all.
Doug, you had a question?
So back to the MWRA project, and the original plan that was talked about in town meeting was we would increase the bill independent of any changes in the cost that we charge residents for water per 1,000 gallons or whatever. The bill would be increased $10 per household per year over 10 years. So at the end of 10 years, everybody would be paying $100 more. But my memory was that was all supposed to go toward the capital outlay for putting the pipes in the ground. Now it sounds like we're using that to buy MWRA water. So that means that we're not paying.
Both. It was the capital cost as well as the delta on the increased cost of the water.
Okay. But since we're now buying more water than we planned, that means we're not.
It's ending up in the.
We're not putting as much aside, okay. Are we putting less aside to pay for the capital project over time than we had planned? Because of the water?
I think the two independent things, the amount that we're setting aside is coming through the rate increases out of the water billings as sort of on the revenue side of things, and the increased costs that we're experiencing for the additional MWRA water is in the expense budget. So I think that those two things are relatively independent of each other right now. But we'll obviously have to reevaluate the schedule as we go along, just to see how much the additional MWRA water so far in advance of when we had planned to take this much will have to impact the overall schedule.
Ed?
My recollection is similar, Doug, when we, doing the water study committee and looking at this, the straight line ramp of the water rates was on par with amortization of the capital investment for the MWRA hookup. And so that leaves us, on the other end, still subsidizing water at a similar rate. And if I recall, what really broke us was the all of the residential yard watering that really strained our peak capacity. And that's still a problem, and I think we're mentioning a number of related problems, and if I may, it won't make me popular in some circles, but one way to solve all of them is to ask people to pay for their water. So if we paid in proportion to our water, we wouldn't have a situation where the more water you use, the more subsidy you were getting, and maybe people would be a little more tempered with how much they put on their lawn.
I didn't pay him to say that.
I was gonna say, that sounds like what Frank said in different words.
Right.
But I agree, I mean,
It's a thought.
it's a service.
They've got the message, I think. We're concerned about how much, A, it costs at all, and B, the level of the subsidy, and what we can do to get better behaviors and understand where it's all going.
Well, certainly as a former accounting person for the town, it makes a lot of sense to, that would be a full-service enterprise fund type of accounting, basically accounting for water.
Right.
As if the water operation was a private business, so, as an accountant, I love that. I know that it's been a long-standing position of the select board over the years that they want to keep as much of the cost of running the town on the tax bills as possible, and under the theory that, your property tax is tax deductible, your water bill is not tax deductible. So, again, the discussion will be had in the future, but that's just a little bit of the history on it.
Yeah.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Shims. Just a little different subject, but the PFAS, when is that coming online and going to be complete? Or is it already?
So the startup and training of the filters actually took place at the end of last week. So we are in the process of backwashing, making it clear and working with DEP to come up with the final testing procedures. So we're hopeful that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, DEP, working with DEP and the testing requirements that we'll need to provide, that should be operational. Final completion won't take place until the fall, but the filters will be filtering.
Oh, so people's water will be filtered? Okay, and then are there other benefits to that new filtration system besides PFAS removal? Is there other things we're cleaning out, or is that not the intent?
I mean, the intent was definitely specific to the PFAS, but they're filters, so presumably they're filtering out other things that we just didn't test and pilot for.
Okay. And how long do those filters last? Do you need to replace them every 2 years?
So the media in it is expected to last, based on the piloting and the Massachusetts regulations, every 2 years or so, hopefully more. It's a little tough to gauge a full-scale production, so that's definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on. We have different sampling ports, so we'll be monitoring the collected PFAS contamination within the filters at various levels to try to come up with an early-on estimate of how quick the media is being spent. But based on the smaller-scale pilot project that we presented to DEP and based the design off of, it was two years or so.
Is that expensive when you have to replace those?
Yes, the filter media that we're using is with the resin. It's not cheap. It's 1.5 million or so as of today. The disposal of it is something that's definitely up in the air as we worked with our consultants to try to come up with a future cost. A lot of disposal sites were hesitant to give exhaust downrange because of the uncertainty of where the state will require them to, whether they require incineration or landfill, and where that landfill is located.
So we should expect like $1 million or so every couple of years, perhaps, to replace those things.
Yeah. I mean, the media will certainly have to be removed and replaced.
Another reason not to have a billboard.
Sonia, I think you had a question.
I'm gonna let it ride. We walked off of the water, then we don't have to go back.
Just to follow up on the PFAS question, I know the state limit was around 20, if I recall, and now we're hearing these national noises of a number around 5. So the obvious question is, when the filter's online, what level do you think it will get down to?
So the filters should still it was the same PFAS chemicals we're filtering out. Obviously, like you said, if our replacement filtration is based on 20 and they cut that down, then the replacement's gonna occur more often. Again, how to translate that from the small scale to the full scale is a little tough. I think our engineering consultant, when talking with them, they were still hopeful that it wouldn't be a lot less than the 2 years that was projected, but again, it's definitely something we'll be monitoring early on to see how quick with the different sampling ports.
Contact time.
So if I hear you correctly, it sounds like it'll get it down low enough, it just means you replace the media more frequently.
Yes, that's the expectation.
We have other questions?
So we're voting the whole thing, so trash is in this vote and everything,
No,
right?
that's an
you're gonna-
accommodated.
Okay, all right.
One at a time.
Well,
Uh,
I see, okay, yes, thank you.
Is that accommodated? Yes, that's accommodated. So it's everything except those 3 accommodated items. If you look at the summary page, you should see,
Don't look at the bottom line.
Yeah,
Some
I
of it.
just
Yeah,
figured that out.
well, it has the total, and then it shows the 2 components, the accommodated and the operating. So we're just talking about the little $10.7 million part right now.
All right, so with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, so you mentioned fuel went up a lot, and that's in materials and supplies? Okay, so here, I see. So I'm under the impression, though, that from last year to this year, it should be around the same cost, if not even lower. Now, gasoline hasn't gone up in the last 12, or diesel, it's pretty flat.
Yeah, so what we've been doing historically for our budget year after year is we use the state numbers for gas and diesel. We take the previous 12 months average, and that's what we use as the numbers.
I see.
It's really difficult to predict gas and diesel, so that's kind of our only method of prediction.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
I think year over year, we've consistently observed that the rate that they say is higher than anybody has seen, but it is conservative, so they don't run out of gas.
Well, they don't run out of money. Yeah, thank you.
Chris?
So in the DPW special accounts, it looks like the tool allowance is going from $600 per person to $1,000. Could you just talk about what some of the tools that are needed, and then are those tools staying within the DPW?
Yeah, so that actually came out of the union contract, so we're contractually obligated to do that. And again, the reason for that is inflation.
And then, second, if you don't mind. On the mass, on the highway, I noticed the MISC repairs have gone from 20,000 to 25,000. Can you talk about what the MISC repairs would be for that line item? The second one down. On contracted services.
20 to 25. That's actually police details. Miscellaneous repairs is level funded at
Oh,
4,000.
so sorry. Thank you for that.
All good, Chris? Okay. Mike, David, sorry.
Just curious of the snow removal
Yeah.
and sand, just where it looked like this year. I mean, we can run that in a deficit, we budget the 350, but where does it stand this year?
So we did go to the select board to get only 250,000 more this year, because as you know, it was not as heavy as a year. The issue is the increase in cost of salt and paying for contractors, because it's been increasingly difficult to get contractors to want to plow for us. So I think we just crossed into over 400,000, and that's inclusive of the operations for the contractors and paying overtime for our staff.
So a cheap year
I mean,
so far.
compared to the average, sure.
Typical year is closer to 850 or 900 on an annual basis.
And usually 350 is budgeted, and then we make up the deficit.
Yes.
Correct. John's accounting for additional funding as he puts together the entire tax rate recap budget.
Okay.
Move to approve?
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All right, so this is for the DPW operating budget of $10,708,201. Those in favor, raise your hand.
201.
Did I get that wrong?
No, 210?
No, 201. You gotta go.
Oh, I'm sorry. What above it?
Yeah, you're sitting too close to Brad.
It's contagious.
Maybe you can get it from Brad's budget. All right, so once again, $10,708,201. Yes, okay.
I'd vote for that.
Yeah. That's much better than 10. All right, against? Abstain? Thank you. All right, that's 13-0-0.
All right.
Okay, so now we can talk about trash.
Great.
Roger.
So, the trash, there's been a lot of discussion about trash, and both the selectmen and the Rachel and Brian have done a lot of work trying to figure out what their next contract is. So the contract for hauling the trash away, collection, ends at the end of June. So they're working on a replacement of the contract. The contract for disposal runs another year. So, but in trying to find a new contract, Burlington is teaming up with Tingsboro and Tewksbury to sort of continue what we've done the last year with the same providers, same provider hauler. But obviously the costs have to go up because there's a lot of inflation, there's additional cost of disposal, and so overall it's going up. I'll give the big number, and actually I think I'm going to ask Rachel to explain. It's going up by 36%, and the plan will cover the next few years. In January, town meeting approved a contract term of up to 5 years, and so that's going into the negotiation. A longer contract term can help cut the costs than rather a 3-year term or something, so that's in the process. So it's up to 3.159710, 3.1 million plus, and that's a big improvement, a big increase. Rachel, can you explain a little bit more in depth of what's going on and how we got here?
Just to be clear, this on the summary budget page and under special accounts, and that gives the detail there of the breakdown also. Yes, would you please add color to that?
I would love to. So we all knew this was coming down the pike. We've talked about it at a few meetings previously, but now we're getting really close to June 30th, so we still don't have pen to paper, but we're getting really close. The main reasons for the increase is, we've mentioned this before, again, closure of the solid waste disposal facilities. They're closing all over the place. Currently, we haul our trash to Covanta and Haverhill, which luckily is still operating. And as Roger mentioned, we're in contract with them for another year. Another increase is tipping fees, and that's directly related to that as well. So another thing you'll see is the recycling processing. We've always had a cap of $60 a ton. That cap is no longer there because I believe this year every single month has been at least $100. So they are losing major money on us by not paying that. So and other towns are in the exact same boat. I think Billerica and Chelmsford both went up between $800,000 and $1 million for their solid waste disposal contract too. Big increase in yard waste. Nobody wants to do it. They would love if we got rid of it, but our biggest priority was keeping all services exactly as they are for all the residents. We got a lot of really great feedback from after a select board meeting we had last year. And we understood that that's how people want it as it exists today, so we wanted to keep going with that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I just want to add, so what Rachel said, the select board had several discussions about this, including a public hearing, and we got one of the few topics where we received a lot of feedback on, and the feedback was almost unanimous that through email and in person, that the residents liked their trash service and really didn't want to see any changes to every other week recycling, or they didn't want to come up with a new way to get rid of yard waste. It was almost overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I can't recall not one comment or email that said that they would want the service changed. So it was literally one of the issues that we've gotten the most feedback on since I've been doing this, so whatever it's worth.
Trash and water are big highlights in the residents network.
We're very lucky.
Yes, you're in the top two.
And hopefully the two never beat.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's keep them separate. Do we have questions on this account?
Chairman, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All right, so this is on the trash removal accommodated account of $3,159,710.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
You have a
go
question?
ahead, yep.
So has the contract been agreed to, or is it still in discussion? Is this going out to bid, and you took some kind of average to cost this out, or?
No, so we didn't go to bid on this one, and the reason being is that previously, we've only needed about a year, maybe 18 months to get a bid put together. And when we started having conversations with the three big haulers, being Republic Services, Casella, and Waste Management, they told us that in order to accommodate for at least Burlington, they'd need to buy more trucks and hire more staff, which is seemingly impossible to do in that 18-month time frame. So one person said they would rent equipment and hopefully be able to hire, contracted staff, and that was not a comfortable answer for us. Another hauler said straight up, reach out to us when you go to bid again in the next 5 years because we can't take you this year. And then Republic said, we know your services, we know your town, we've been working with you, it's been going well and increasingly better over the years, so we're happy to extend your contract.
That's for what year?
5.
The extension is?
5-year extension.
Okay.
So the goal is probably 2.5 years from now, we'll actually prepare a request for proposal and see what people come in with bids.
We've been following other towns that have recently put out RFPs as well, and these prices seem pretty competitive with what they've been seeing.
All right, thank you.
So just to be clear on Brad's question there, the value that's in here is presumably consistent with what Republic has suggested it will be?
Yes.
Okay.
There shouldn't be any surprises.
Excellent. It is surprising enough. Okay. All right, so just to reiterate, it's $3,159,710. Raise your hand in favor. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, that's 1300. That down here. So the next accommodated account, which is on that same special account page, is streetlights. Roger?
So no surprises here. This is level funded and it's the same as been done for at least the past several years. So there's no increase. It's $360,500. And this is the last year of the 5-year lighting plan? Is that? I guess not. All right.
So,
It was the LED
I
program,
thought
right?
this was the LED replacement, townwide LED replacement, and this is,
It's not
So-
the last year, we're getting there, right?
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. It's slowly dwindling down.
anyway, this keeps the streetlights on in town. Sounds like I didn't ask enough questions before, I'm sorry. Anyway, it's level funded and it keeps the streetlights burning and cuts our electricity use townwide for lights, which is the most important piece, because we're saving a bunch of money townwide, with more to come.
Great. Would you like to add anything to that? Very good. And I did see just recently we're like a green community or something you had announced, I believe.
Yeah, we were designated a green community in February of 2020. So this is our,
A little behind apparently. All right.
There's a separate warrant article we'll come to in a few weeks for more and future energy savings and improvements, but that's not part of this budget.
I'll just shut up. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Very good. All right, this street lights for $360,500. Those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? All right, very good. That passes 13-0-0. David, you're in charge of poking Frank there. And the final accommodated has the DEP water assessment. Roger?
Yep. Again, same line item we've seen for years, to cover the payment to the state that allows us to pump water out of the aquifer, I guess. $15,000, no surprises. So that's about all there is to say.
Anything to add to that? Nope. Okay. Frank?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear on that, this is going to be strictly for Bill Pond, I would assume, once we shut down the water treatment plant?
Yeah, hopefully this number.
The assessment is a result of Bill Pond,
Well, it's from the aquifer, which is related to Vinebrook.
but we won't be using that anymore.
So our goal is to run Vinebrook probably for requirements once or twice a month until we know that we can shut it down completely, and hopefully when we get to that moment, we won't have to.
So maybe within, it's about a year away, maybe?
Sure, yeah, we'll
Okay.
have to
And then-
reassess the assessment.
But the point is, this assessment will never go away just because we draw from the Shawshene.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're.
Am I
making-
right or am I wrong? Shawshene is runoff, and you keep using the word aquifer.
So the aquifer is over on Middlesex Turnpike.
Right.
And that's the groundwater that we used to treat at the Vinebrook.
So
treatment
this
plant.
will go away.
To my understanding, yes.
That would be, okay. Actually, that's not the way I understood it historically. Just using the Shawshene did it right away.
I'll have to double check on that. I mean, this has been a line item.
Yeah, this is a very old piece of legislation, right?
I'll have to confirm that it's the aquifer versus
Yeah,
Mill Pond.
that-
It might be a law just as long as you make your own drinking water, you have to pay this.
It'd be good to know,
annual.
right?
Sure.
Maybe you can prevent the state from gouging us when we don't need to be.
15 grand is 15 grand, but
It's been going on forever. What do we get out of it?
state oversight.
We're allowed to drink
We're allowed to take water,
Right,
yeah.
as if they monitored the aquifer.
Other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right. So this is the DEP water assessment for $15,000. In favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? All right, that's 13-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to, let's try an easy one here. We have an accommodated account of pension reimbursement and a scorecard for $0. Am I correct in assuming that's still zero?
Yeah, that's gonna go away, that
It's
use,
historical.
it's historical, it's not in the central administration budget anymore, but.
Yeah, it was
still
tied
in
to,
school.
it was tied to people, and those people are gone.
Very good. All right, we'll speak of it no more. No vote necessary for $0. All right, the next one, are we ready for the employee benefits? Was Gary coming, or? Oh, there he is. There he is. What timing? All right. So this is the Chapter 32B accommodated account. And do you have a report on that, David?
I do. So everyone got the sheet on the 32B line item, which Gary prepared. And it kind of spells out all the costs, top to bottom, all the sources, the premiums that are charged, all the way down to the expenses that ultimately run down to a total budget of $16,248,398, or a 3.94 increase. The scorecard did have a 4% plug in the beginning of the year. Whitney has changed that, so the correct number should be in the scorecard. But the sheet that you have here, which spelled out how we arrived at that. I'm gonna let Gary kind of go into the nuts and bolts if there are any questions with it. We had the long discussion with it. but I just have some bullets that I wanted to mention through it. Again, we have a very good working relationship with the, between the employee reps and the town, and in setting the health rates. The split now between active employees and in the town is a 70-30 split, with funds going into the trust fund. The trust fund now has approximately just under $10 million in it, so it's fairly, healthy from where we're at, but again, some bad years and that can be eaten away. The town self-insures our claims, but we do have a stop loss on that. Although the goal is to get people into the higher deductible type plans, again, that's something that's moving along, but it's still not, I guess, where we may reap some additional benefits, so, but it's heading in that direction. We have a consultant that works directly with the health companies and us to negotiate the annual renewals. Again, understand the town is on a June 30th fiscal year, and the health insurance companies are on a calendar year. So again, it's hard for Gary to know exactly where the rates are going to stand at the end of the year, but based on historic and discussions, we have an additional premium for the second 6 months of the year. Claim rates have been going up a little bit over the past few years. Again, we had the COVID years where really no one was going to the doctors, and now it is going up. But again, the issue is having the good, solid trust fund in place. We spoke about other healthcare options that we've always had the opportunity to do, just getting billed direct, the state GIC plans and all that versus being self-insured. This certainly has saved us money over the years. And again, we've seen what I term very reasonable increases in a line item that could be much higher. So under a 4% increase this year seems very reasonable. So I'll let Gary, again, kind of explain the sheet to what extent he wants or what extent people have questions. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Okay. We have Gary Giannino, Town Treasurer Collector. Would you like to add anything to that?
We're here for questions if there are. We do have, as David talked about, we're trying to move, we have a HSA, a health savings account with Harvard Pilgrim Health that we started a few years ago. We are getting some increased participation there. We're trying to move people to that if we can. HSA creates a savings account for the individuals, which accumulates over the year versus something like flex spending that we also offer. That's a use it or lose it type of approach. Presently this year, we've increased, we have 76 people in it now. Last year we had 54, so we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully at the health fair this October, we'll continue to get some traction on that plan.
Do you provide incentives for people to migrate over to that plan, and do they also have options to invest with the plan that you have for the HSAs?
They can invest more money if they would like. I think my memory serves me correct. It can go up to about $7,500. I could be wrong on that. Could be.
There are investment choices that they can.
Well, they can put money into the plan. It's not as an investment so much as it flows forward with them. They can't choose where they're going to keep that money.
Oh, I see.
It's through the health equity, a company we use. We do receive some interest on that, but it's not as if you can go into different funds or something.
Okay, thanks.
We do incentivize individuals. We reimburse some of the employees a specific amount if they enter that plan. Say the deductible for a single is $3,000, a family $6,000. We basically reimburse them 50%. We'll put that into their health savings account. We do that on our HMO. We do 500 and 1,000. That's $2,000 deductible plan. We've also incentivized them a bit more by offering a $300 or $600 incentive. We took a look at it probably about, it was last year. And when you took the premium paid, the deduction, the deductible, and some out-of-pocket costs you might have, it was very close between the HMO and the HSA. So we pushed in another $600, hoping that would influence some people. But I think as word gets out, the benefits are basically the same on the HMO versus the HSA. The cost is less.
Thank you.
Roger?
You mentioned the provider, the company that manages the HSA funds. You had picked a particular company. I've just observed that I have an HSA, and the company that manages those funds does have an option to invest in mutual funds on a back end. So I don't know what that would give value add to the HSA when you get a chance to look at that again.
I'll take a look at that. I didn't, we've been focusing on people getting into the program, but that would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, actually, I'm gonna throw in a couple questions here. What is the cap on stop loss?
$125,000.
Okay.
That program is getting more expensive. We've looked at the option of moving to 100. Moved from 100 to 125, I think, 2 years ago. There was a savings. We looked at the program this year to go to 150. That incremental savings in costs didn't warrant the risk, and it proved out this year. We had some high claimants. So.
And so this is for, I thought, current employees, right? This insurance, or because
We have active employees. We have retired employees.
Okay,
who
then,
care.
then I admit, Frank probably is anticipating my question, but I thought OPEB was covering the
Well, I think we
retired.
should clarify that. So historically, every year, regardless of what the program is, when you purchase the health insurance, you purchase it for everybody that's on health insurance, teachers, active employees, and retirees. And we break out in here the cost of the actives versus the retired, and that's the pay-as-you-go piece for the retirees. And that's what we've been doing forever. At some point, the OPEB account, through its earnings, would have enough money to cover that pay-as-you-go slice, and this would pretty much go away. Currently, we're not drawing on the OPEB account
That's
or
correct.
anything. It's just accumulating and earning money at your 6.85% or whatever. And someday, we can decide when and to what extent we want to draw on that to offset this year it's 3.2 million, just the base cost of the retiree insurance. The whole reason that GASB and every other analysis of municipalities had was that as time went on, that pay-as-you-go number would get so big, it would swamp your operating budget in a bigger percentage way. So right now, it's, out of the whole healthcare thing, it's about, 3 million out of 16 million. It's not too bad, but it will grow. And if you look at the head count, the retiree head count is about the same as the actives. So, that's gonna go the other way. We're retiring people and hiring them at about the same rate, but if anything, the retiree, but they're not, they're living, right? They stay alive till the average of 83. So that number's gonna hit some peak.
All right, thank
Right.
you. I was definitely thinking about that the wrong way. I appreciate it.
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of numbers here.
And is this including school employees?
Yes.
Yes, it's everybody,
Everybody, okay.
everybody.
Okay,
Benefit by having a larger pool of people.
there's the silver lining.
Well, law of averages kind of thing.
Well, in terms of our you didn't mention this today, here, tonight, but our cohort is a pretty well-behaved cohort. They're pretty healthy. They're sensitive to how much health insurance they use, because they pay 30% of it. And we really have good behaviors, and that's reflected in the fact that the claims stay pretty reasonable, and that the growth rate of what we have to cover is far less than the national average. So the program has been very successful.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on that? All right, we did.
Does the school budget pay for their portion?
No.
So that comes under this accommodation.
Right. They pay for their pensions completely. They do not pay for their health, well, they do. Their salaries are garnished 30%.
Yeah, the employees do.
Right.
The school operating budget
No,
doesn't.
it does not have health care in it.
Neither does any other budget, right? Because it's in that separate account.
Correct, it's all right here. This one sheet of paper is the whole thing.
No, it's a fair point, though. It makes it a little more challenging to figure out what is the real split between the town side and the school side, because some stuff is grouped together.
But that's just the bigger number, you know, these smaller budgets for various commissions are also, don't pay their own healthcare costs.
Yes, yes, but traditionally, we've liked to think about, what's the school versus non-school part of it. This is a case where we don't split it out.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for $16,258,300.
No.
248.
248.
Brad, what is it?
You're moving that digit up to the left now.
Oh, I'm doing it.
Right.
Wow.
This is starting to add up.
If you're gonna do it, go big. Hold on a second, I just want to make sure that because I really.
Actually, the scorecard isn't updated. That's what's.
I cut and pasted.
you refresh.
And Whitney to the bell.
I cut and pasted from the old scorecard, so I'm a little behind. So thank you for catching that. And thank you for the update, Whitney.
Just in time.
I would like to give a shout out to Whitney, who's been doing a fabulous job of really putting together a lot of data here and making it all available on the web, which really helps quite a bit.
Yes.
All right, so in an immediate savings of $10,000.
Great negotiation, John.
The new number is $16,248,300. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
398.
Right.
Yeah.
I need to correct all the digits, not just some of them. All right, let me just make sure I got that right. Okay, very good. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? All right, that's 1300. Get that down here. Oops. Okay. Next is the reserve fund. Do we have a report on that, David?
Yep, so the reserve fund, in the scorecard listed as 119, it's 200,000, it's the Ways and Means Emergency Fund that we have typically started with 200,000 during the initial budget, and then we augment once free cash is certified in January for another 100, bringing a total of 300, gives us the ability to fund emergency expenses without calling a full town meeting. We have not expended any money this year yet. There was a fire engine that lost an engine that we needed to replace. So we're
misplaced it.
So it could be anticipated that before the end of this fiscal year, we'll see a transfer out of that to fund that engine. But at the end of the year, it all goes back into free cash. So subcommittee voted 2-0.
Okay, just to be clear, this is in the other accounts budget page if you're looking for that?
Yes, in the scorecard. if you look under 119, the first 119, Ways and Means Reserve.
And I haven't introduced you guys, even though you've been here all day. So we have Paul Sagarino, Town Administrator, and John Denizio, Assistant Town Administrator.
And Whitney.
And Whitney, who's hiding in the back with all the numbers. Whitney Haskell-Jewison, who is our Budget Director. Thank you for your patience. Would you guys like to add anything to that? Okay, any questions? Roger?
Just a comment.
Yes.
This is the most amazing budget because it goes down by 33% every year.
Yes, and we secretly.
It's all in the timing, Roger.
When no one's looking at town meeting, yes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Thank you. All right, so this is for the reserve fund of $200,000. Raise your hand if in favor. Opposed? Abstained? That passes 13-0-0. All right, next is also under other accounts, negotiated settlements.
Yeah.
David?
So negotiated settlements, you'll see for '24, $208,516. Again, our only unsettled line item is A&P, which is not a contract. It's a contract with our non-union representatives in the town, management positions, manages about 48 people in the town. So what you will see is, typically the number in here is based upon what the unionized increase has been, and typically that is done on an annual basis with the A&P plan. So once everything is finalized, you'll see the movement from this negotiated settlement line item into the actual budgets that represent those employees. So subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor.
Would you like to add anything? No. Okay. Any questions? Brad?
So 208,516 is very specific. Why isn't it a rounder number, or do you guys have inside information?
It was to trip you up, Brad.
I know that you don't like Brad numbers. So what the goal for when we budgeted was to cover a deal with the managers, supervisors that is similar to what the union got. And it just worked out to that. At one point, that was probably to get us under 3.75 at that time.
All right.
So there may have been another $50 in there at one point, or at least 4 to get it to an even number.
All right, thank you.
I believe the accounting term is round is wrong. So. Any further questions?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Very good. All right, this is for the negotiated settlements of $208,516. Those in favor vote, or raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? All right, that's 13-0-0. I did put in one other one, which I called other, just because there are so many accommodated accounts. Have I forgotten any?
Debt service will be
I know
another at a
debt
future
service
meeting.
and principal and
But-
interest is.
So we have nothing for other, right?
Yeah, I put that on just
Yeah.
as a placeholder. I know we wanted to
Right.
reschedule that. Do we have a later date on that at this point?
We don't, we are thinking, it looks like the night of the warrants for the Town Hall 1 also includes some of the public service, or I think that probably will be the night it gets discussed.
Okay, if you can give me a few days advance warning, just to make sure.
Oh, sure.
I post it, that would be excellent.
But that would be April, I think it's 26th or something like that.
And we do that in free cash at the same time?
Well, free cash, we can have a kind of a discussion tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, so maybe Whitney can confirm this if she happens to know. I believe the only remaining operating accounts that we haven't covered are under education. And I believe the only remaining accommodated accounts we haven't covered are under education and debt. Is there anything else missing that I've somehow overlooked? Okay. All right, So I think we're looking pretty good in terms of those things. So I believe you wanted to have a little discussion about free cash, if we could do that there.
So part of our subcommittee meetings, typically, Town Hall 1 has taken a look at kind of what the spending will be on the warrants and what position we want to be in as we head into next fiscal year. So we've typically done that prior to, or as the warrants are being, before the warrants are being discussed, and it's just something to think about. So there's no necessarily a vote here. But taking a look at the sheet that John put together, we certified cash at the end of, from last year at the $24,975,130. We did have some cash expenditures at our January town meeting, which are listed in the form. That totaled about $1,335,000 and change. And then ultimately we have kind of the list that hasn't been finalized, but is what is being proposed in this year's warrant. We haven't seen all the articles yet. We haven't seen the final numbers that are coming in. We haven't seen the ones that are getting pulled. So these are estimates, and John's indicated them as estimates. But when all is said and done, if we were to approve everything that as presented and have our discussions, that would leave approximately, we would be spending about $10 million, a little over $10 million, with the capital warrants of $4.9 million, more or less split between the school and the town side. We have a couple of larger warrants that are going to be on for this year. One includes the aerial fire truck, which is typically a bonded number. We also have the water mains that for $1.5 million, which also generally might be considered a bonding number. So again, we have the discussion as far as what makes the most sense, and although we haven't talked the debt schedule yet, we've got a lot of debt items that are coming up in the future, and the whole idea is trying to smooth it as best we can, but we know there's a lot of big ticket items that are going to be coming through. So, and we've got a fair amount of free cash, and there are other places that we could spend, keep free cash, or hold on to it for those projects that are coming forward to try and smooth out some of those as we go forward. The number, we had talked about, utilizing free cash as expenditures on those two larger items this year. And again, if that was done, and all the rest were as estimated, and going forward, again, that would leave about $13 million a little over $13 million, $13.5 of free cash for next year, fiscal year. Other things to consider. Do you put extra money into stabilization? We have approximately $10 million in stabilization. And the Town Hall 1 committee and the administration, we've talked about trying to formulate some sort of, not necessarily a guidance as far as where that number should be. Is 10 million the right number as we continue to grow our operating budget? It does seem like a lot of money, and when bonding and other financial worlds are looking at us as a whole, they're looking at what your free cash is, what your stabilization is, what your excess capacity is, and it's all kind of lumped together. So we have different pockets of money that we can be, in effect, drawing from and look at how fiscally strong the town is. So there's no right and wrong place. So is 10 million in stabilization enough money, or should we be considering more? We had a discussion on OPEB. Do we throw more money in OPEB and not carry it forward for this year? And again, we've now topped that $1 million number based upon the 9.3 that we continue to go up. So Again, no right and wrong, there's parking some additional monies in OPEB. I think we decided as a subcommittee that we were fine with not putting more money into OPEB. But again, maybe we want to talk about it as a group if people feel differently, or the same thing with stabilization. So as presented here, if the numbers do pan out, this is what it would be looking at. No right and wrong and no vote taken, but these are the numbers as they're looking. And just, I guess, open it up to Mr. Chairman and the administration of what other things people might be looking at that you want to see.
Do you have are you collectively coming up with what a good number is for stabilization?
So we've had the discussion, and I think that is on our to-do list. I don't think this will be done for this year, meaning this fiscal year, planning. I'm comfortable, and I was talking to Frank, that 10 million is a number that I'm comfortable with still right now. That's a good amount of money in stabilization. But we have talked about formalizing some sort of, not necessarily, whether it's a policy, whether it's a percentage of budget or operating budget, or what, I don't know what the right number is. Maybe it's just a guidance that as we go on, that we want to stay within a certain, but we've opened up the discussion, and they're certainly open to us formulating something more specific.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't.
To me, being an engineer, it feels like there should be a formula based on something to come up with a number. And you can base on as much as you want. The other thing I'll throw in there, and then I'll get to you, Brad, is presumably while you're working on this, the figure for what current debt should be at a maximum would seem to be another good formula to come up with, to make sure we're not exceeding whatever the answer to that is.
Exceeding or being too light?
I'm not worried about being too light.
Well, yeah.
I'm worried about being too heavy.
Yeah.
But, if you want to put a lower bound on it, you can.
And that's where but that's where the smoothing comes into play, because again, when you backload a lot, we've got a lot of large capital improvements that we're gonna be making that we know we need to, and sometimes the can just gets kicked down the road, and all of a sudden you've got an influx of projects, and it seems like we've got a number of those between the schools and the town side that are coming in. So the idea on smoothing is great, however, it has to work if you can do it. So again, having some free cash available, taking some stuff off the schedule as we do increase, and trying to be reasonable in that. But that's where holding some of the free cash we felt was maybe more important right now than. So anyway.
Brian.
So there was a formula at one time, and I'm trying to remember, was it purely from Mr. Mercier, or did I just pick this up off the streets? But the rough rule of thumb.
You're predating all of us. Tell us.
The rough rule of thumb was free cash stabilization plus taxing capacity running at about 10% of operating. But I used that number in front of John Petrin, and that shocked him because he himself did not want to throw in the taxing capacity in for that emergency figure. But does that?
And I think I reminded him that the rating agencies did, at that time. But yes, that was sort of a generally accepted rule, that a good amount of reserves was about 10% of your annual spending. And that was, for us, that was a combination of free cash, stabilization fund, as well as our untaxed levy capacity. I think we're pretty close to getting there just with our free cash and our stabilization, so we can debate whether levy capacity should be included in there. But that was the long-stated, statewide, it was considered a pretty good metric, 10% of your operating budget in reserves. What pocket it is in, stabilization or free cash, less important, but just that 10% was sort of a pretty standard figure across the state for a good amount of reserves.
John, if I can add one thing about the rating agencies will also when we talked about too high or too low on the debt service as a percentage of your operating budgets, they have a too low mark too. You know, they want you between 4 and 8%, 8, you know, on the high side, and they don't want you to be less than 4, because that probably means you're not investing in infrastructure the way you should be, so.
You can't.
Right, I'll throw a couple of things in the mix there. One I would say, given that the excess levy or unused levy capacity is not as readily available, it seems like that should be derated at a minimum, and, you know, figure out what the derating factor is, you know, because I'm pretty sure if we used that all in 1 year, we'd have a problem. The other thing, and I talked with you about this a little bit, Frank, is it seems like the wrong thing is to look at the amount of debt in my mind, and in particular, I really get alarmed when people say we should have at least this much debt or we're doing something wrong. I think a better way to look at it is to say, what is the proper amount of capital spending we should be doing each year? And, you know, if we've smoothed things out so perfectly, we can do it out of free cash and have no debt, that would be a perfectly great solution, right? So I think debt is really just a proxy for the right amount of capital spending. So I would argue that what we should really figure out is what's the right amount of capital spending each year, you know, when you average it out over some period of time. And if we hit that number, then we're presumably investing enough in our infrastructure everywhere and, you know, keeping things from falling down. So I would suggest we should focus on that first and then back that out and figure out what does that imply in terms of debt. And similarly, you know, current debt, you know, should, you know, count 100%, but, you know, with roughly speaking, a 30-year debt plan, the present value is sort of about half of the total debt, you know, depending on how you look at the discount rate. But, so, that would be where I would come in.
And the bond rating agencies do that. That's how they compute the formulas. And we did not have much debt at one time, well under 4%, I believe. But Paul kept reminding us that, yeah, the capital warrant articles really count toward that percentage. So that is how everybody counts things, John.
Good. You're way ahead of me then. Excellent. Right.
Yeah, just to follow on, because John and I did talk about this, but you have to capture, I think, the notion, John, and I think John alludes to it. What the rating agencies are drawing upon is a lot of history of municipalities that don't do well and that do well. And one way to not do well is to ignore your infrastructure long enough that you can't operate efficiently anymore, or you've got serious problems that you can't pay for. So you know there's a lower limit because everything wears out, even though you shouldn't spend money just because you're getting to the lower limit. You need a reason. But what they're trying to tell everybody is the reasons are there, you might be ignoring them. And one of the flags of ignoring them is not spending enough on infrastructure. Now, that doesn't mean debt. What it means is you've got to finance projects. The problem that you run into, tied into that, is that the projects that really matter cost a lot of money. And you almost can't do that no matter how you accumulate free cash because the number's so big. You can only get so much free cash. Like if we had $100 million in free cash, I'm pretty sure there'd be 100 people sitting out there saying, why are you stockpiling all my money? You're overtaxing me.
Well, just from a mathematical point of view, if you took all the money that, you know, if you cleverly did your infrastructure, and I'll stop being hypothetical in a moment, if you perfectly smoothed out your capital projects, then the amount that you're putting into debt, principal, and interest, if you spent that instead in steady state on capital projects each year, you wouldn't need any debt. And yet you'd be spending the same amount as you would have on debt.
But
You'll
you
never
can't
get anyone to build
I'm just saying, subject to
$100
this.
million school.
So my point is the debt should just be used for smoothing out, not to increase your spending per se. That's the
Oh,
conclusion.
well, sure it is, because it's a payment schedule.
I'm gonna
for a
suggest we
commitment.
make some spreadsheets and we can
Yeah,
argue about that.
I
We're-
think-
we're
I
getting
think
a li-
actually-
We're getting a little deep in it now, and I'll stop.
All right.
Sonia's saying, can I go to bed now? Roger?
Well, I mean, we do have, we do have a 10-year capital plan, and they'll maybe need a longer capital plan than that. And if-
I'll work on it more.
Or work on it more, and if it was stretched out longer, that, I think, would reflect what you were saying about evaluating your capital spending. And then you could put a price tag on that capital plan and say, here's what we have to borrow. But then there are sort of more opportunistically things that come up that your constituents decide you should spend money on. But they're usually smaller, so. We can-
They won't
This is a
simply be
topic-
buying a new school.
This is, yeah, this is a topic that is rich and deep and hard to talk about.
Which is why we have our town hall one on it. Go ahead, Brad.
I'm retiring.
And when it comes to smoothing, in all the years I've been on the committee, there's always been a spike 3 to 5 years out, right? So it's, anyway. I just had a couple quick questions. I don't know if this is the subcommittee or the administration, but the aerial, just checking, aerial tower truck was on this was an expected expense for this year on the plan. And then just on the capital warrant articles, I know an amount is always, we come up with an amount and say, schools get half, town will get half. Is there a formula behind that, or just as a function of need and ability to spend?
In terms of the amount or
Yeah.
the split?
The total amount, yeah.
So the amount over the years has fluctuated sort of with availability of free cash.
Yep.
So there's been years ago where I remember we were divvying up $1 million between the town and the school. So it does fluctuate. We still try to, just because we had this amount of free cash, we didn't want to invest it all in capital warrant articles. So we're trying to be, cognizant of the future. But it does fluctuate with the availability of free cash, so.
All right.
So, I'm sorry, Sonia, go ahead. Go ahead, Sonia.
Oh, I wasn't.
She was gonna move.
Oh, you want to, I don't want to adjourn just yet, so,
Oh, no, I wasn't adjourning even. I was just sitting here twirling.
okay. I don't have any hair to twirl, so I've got to talk.
She was giving you your points are
So,
fascinating.
all right, so what I want to say is this, relative to the sort of the slice of free cash that we make available for annual warrant articles, that number is governed by just judgment that we make about how much of the, free cash can we really set aside, because we know the list of small to medium things. You don't even need to look at a 5-year capital plan. There's always stuff we can't get to. Every year, something rolls off based on priorities. So I look at that process as fine, but when departments and capital budget and whatnot look at things, if something isn't funded, it's just as important to ask what isn't funded as do we need to do what is being funded or requested. And the danger you run by splitting it this way is sometimes something could fall off that doesn't make the priority list, but it has, there's a penalty to be paid by it falling off. Now, most of the time, I think we get it right, but I think we as a committee, when we look at departments and ask questions, we need to be sensitive to what they're not doing as well. And that's a case of you shouldn't spend money just because you've got it, but if you haven't got it, but you need to spend it, you need to know that you're not doing it and what the impact of that is. And, sometimes maybe things go too long, and you need to be aware of that, I think. That's my only caution on this. I think the scheme works well when you got enough money. I mean, this year you're splitting up $5 billion. That's pretty good. It really is. Some years we have a lot less, but we know we're underfunding things, and that can get to be painful. So you have to be careful with that. And I do think the capital budget plan, a really good 5-year plan, is crucial, and it needs to be cleaned up and revisited every single year. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to touch on 2 other quick things. Just homework from last week. there was a question from somebody about what's the sensitivity to tax bills to changes in the budget. And just first, I'll throw in a bunch of caveats and say that the administration completely disavows these numbers because there could be a million things that change. And so don't blame them. I'll take the blame on this one. So if we're talking about a budget change, and again, this is for items that don't have direct revenue that ties to them. So for instance, Veterans Aid, we get reimbursed like 75% from the state. So a change there doesn't affect the tax bill nearly as much as, just spending another $1 million on a road or whatever. So this is for things that don't have a corresponding revenue piece that directly correlates to it. In that case, if the budget goes up $1 million or it goes down $1 million, the average single-family house bill will change by about $45. So that's the sensitivity that we're talking about. So for instance, if we could get rid of that darn DPW budget of $10 million, we could save everyone $450. So that's sort of the analysis. Of course, we'd have no roads or anything, but that would come out next year. So that's a number that people can be working with when they can decide is saving X dollars or spending X dollars a good idea. That's the impact that it has. So that's one homework.
So that's against raise and appropriate money. That's new dollars coming in from taxes.
Or save dollars. Yeah, exactly.
Anything being paid from the tax levy.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
The other homework item that John will be working on for a future meeting was just giving the ARPA accounting that you had asked for. Paul had given us a rough accounting, so John's just going to throw a little more meat on that so we see the details.
Down to the cent.
So we can see where that goes. Excellent.
So,
yes.
just to tie right into this, Mr. Chairman, very briefly. So take, for example, the monies that we get from the meals tax. That rolls into the general fund, correct? And at the end of the fiscal year, the books are all balanced up and closed up. And the free cash is the money that is unencumbered and came in somehow, even if it came from a meals tax versus it was raised and appropriated. That all goes to free cash, am I right?
And unspent budgets as well.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure of that. So, one of the things we need to be mindful of is that free cash, that number could move all over the lot. It can get very small, actually. And it's more likely to get smaller than it is to get bigger, in my opinion, for that reason.
Hasn't happened recently, but yeah.
Actually, we're on a very unusual run, I think.
Well, I think
I don't
part
know
of
if
it
these
is
guys
that we make budgets where we don't start with a $500,000 deficit. We have to make up, there's $500,000 extra in free cash that you wouldn't have had. So I think the fact that we're budgeting a little more conservatively is helping lead to more free cash at the end of the year.
No, I don't think so.
I think
I
it
think
directly follows.
By conservative, you mean it's tighter or it's
No,
more,
I'm
you're
saying,
giving
in the
upside?
past, we've started with a structural deficit that we hoped we'd make up somehow. That directly reduced the free cash that would
Right.
result if you had a budget with no deficit built in.
Right, but when you wire your budgets down to every last dollar, you're gonna get less free cash out of it, right? So what we try to do is make the budgets reflect safely, conservative's a funny word here, safely, that we've got enough money to operate the way we wanna operate, and that's what it's gonna cost. And if we're lucky, we've got some left over that flushes right into free cash.
Yes, Sonia?
Right, I guess is what I want to say about that. But I also wanted to add, we talk a lot of, and we did talk about it last week, adding, how much money is spent, what you raise and appropriate, and what that means to the taxpayer. The only thing I want to caution us on is you know, there are, like you said, accounts where it isn't necessarily 100% from the raise and appropriate rate, and there are other funding mechanisms that come in. My fear of splitting up departments, though, is that you don't really, you know, there are some departments that necessarily don't have an advocacy group, for example, or something that, you know, if it doesn't have an offset, you know, you use DPW as an example, but let's use DPW as an example, because you know, there's a lot of things that happen in a department like that where you don't realize how much is funneling through, and they don't really bring in, per se, anything that offsets it. So I just caution that we look at it like, how much are we, you know, when you're approving budgets, you're looking at a totality of like, this is how much all of the budgets are, and this is how much it's gonna raise it, just so that we're not taking, I guess I'm just marginally sensitive to saying we're not taking one budget over another, or we're not saying this could be increased, but this one is okay because we're bringing in money from somewhere
I
else.
certainly didn't mean to suggest we should be looking at profit
No.
centers and getting rid of unprofitable departments.
No, I don't mean it that way. I'm saying as we're educating, I think this is truly an education process, because we're gonna come across it as we move forward. If we're talking about moving to the point where the community understands that it's leveled services or not leveled services, you really do have to understand that concept of how much, you know, $1 million is on your tax dollar, but also that it's not one department over another, because you'll, you know, in tighter years, if anybody's been in this room, and a lot of us have, in tighter years, you know, people will say, well, give it to X, but don't give it to X, they get whatever, but it really is about, you know, is the will of the community to continue to fund services across the board.
I think a more meaningful way to look at that number would be, for instance, I think they talked about with the trash removal.
Yes.
If we have yard waste removal, you know, just pick a number out of my,
Bless you.
pick a random number, if it cost $1 million to do the yard waste removal, I know it's not that much. If we got rid of that, everyone could save $45.
Yes,
That's
no,
really
I'm with
the
you
kind
on
of
that.
thing I would look at it.
I think it's really important, because I think we're talking about it a lot recently. We've talked about it as a committee a lot, but I think we're not only gonna be talking about it soon, I think in years to come, it's a discussion that really has to be had, you know, is the will of the community to continue to serve, you know, you heard DPW say it earlier, Rachel said it earlier, we did everything the way because we had heard that, you know, at the select board level of, you know, community came out and said they want their trash exactly the same. This is the year they're gonna see what that actually means, when you get your trash exactly the same, you know? Whereas before we're still very fortunate that we have space to be able to pay for it, but there's an actual dollar amount that attaches to it, I guess. That's what it's just food for thought as we're moving forward, because it is really an education process. Not, those of us that sit in a room like this, we get used to it, you know, it's like the numbers, we talk about it, but we also know the ramifications of it. I think it's really important for town meeting to hear it, and then ultimately for residents to hear it as well, because it's very easy to say we want to continue to have our services exactly as they are, but there is an actual dollar amount that attaches to that.
The trick is you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So going forward, next week is Education Week. So we'll be having the Burlington School budget and their warrant articles, in addition to the assessments for the regional schools and special education accommodated budget. So that'll be a busy night.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
John or Paul, do we have the assessments for Northern Essex Tech? Okay, thank you.
All right, hopefully by next week.
Hopefully, but that's an easy enough one, we could take it at the last minute.
It's certainly a smaller one. Thank you.
School
Okay,
warrant list? Do we have the school warrant list?
Thank you very much, guys.
No.
And we do not have minutes.
Do we have a school warrant list yet?
We have the index, we don't have the dollar amounts yet.
Okay. So we got,
I know of. Do you
What
know?
was the question?
The dollar amounts on the school warrant?
Yes, they voted them already.
Okay,
I can, I think I sent that out as part of the, if not, I will send it out.
I haven't seen
I
the
don't,
dollar.
Any
I
backup
don't
or-
recall seeing dollar amounts on those. If-
Okay.
We got the total warrant article list.
Maybe that, I'll follow up tomorrow night and make sure I have it.
Okay, that'd be great.
And is there any support? Like, again, does that include all the supporting documentation and all that? The backup?
I'll make sure of that, yeah. I know they put the backup material together because that was part of the stuff they did earlier this year than they did last year. But I'll make sure it goes out.
Did they fill out the capital request forms?
They filled out the capital request forms,
Excellent.
yes.
That was one of the action items.
And
Thank you.
just a reminder, you missed the opening act, which should be the Shawshene Vocational Technical School. Dr. McIntosh will be here.
Okay, I did mention regional school assessments, so.
All right, I wanted to call it up and also,
Yes.
by phrasing it that way, imply that they'll go before the Burlington schools.
Oh, I did not imply an order in any way. Are you suggesting you'd like Shawshene to be first?
That's what I'm suggesting. I called it an opening act for that reason.
Very clever of you. All right, it'll sink in and I'll get the point.
There's a new superintendent, we got the, right in.
We met, actually, we went to Shawshene yesterday and we met both the new business manager and the new superintendent, went over their budget and I sent out both the links to the presentation that they have and the budget. I think the capital budget wasn't part of that. Oh, the capital.
Did you send that link? I don't.
You did, yeah, you did.
Oh, that was a while ago.
That was a while ago. It hasn't changed.
Okay,
It's,
that's what I was.
it's not attached to the document. You actually have to click through it to download it. One of the files was 24 megabytes.
Excellent. All right, so start reading now. So there's two big budgets, the public schools and the vocational budget are both big ones to be looking at. Do we have anything else for tonight?
Minutes?
Motion to adjourn.
Very good.
No minutes.
We're adjourned.
Awesome.